The Historical Books of the Bible. Notes prepared by J. Aloysius Ignatius, Father Gerard J. D. Silva and Father Trevor de Souza, OFM. Summary. In this lesson, you will learn about the historical books of the Old Testament, their classification and key themes. These books narrate Israel's history from the conquest of Canaan to the Maccabean period, emphasizing God's covenant with his people. Major themes include the conquest and settlement, rise of the monarchy, division of the kingdom, exile and return, and the Maccabean revolt. The lesson highlights key lessons such as faithfulness to God, his use of imperfect people, and his mercy. Ultimately, the historical books reveal God's sovereignty, justice, and ongoing involvement in human history. Background information. The original biblical authors did not organize the Bible into various sections such as the Pentateuch, historical books, or prophets. These classifications were developed over time by Christian scholars to help in study and understanding. The classical Hebrew division of the Old Testament consists of the Torah, Pentateuch, the prophets, and the writings. It does not specifically mention historical books. However, Saint Cyril of Jerusalem, AD 315 to 386, a noted scholar, divided the Old Testament into 4 sections: the Law, the historical books, the poetic books, and the prophets. Under historical books, he included Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 and 2 Samuel, 1 and 2 Kings, 1 and 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Later, Pope Saint Innocent I, around AD 405, added Job, Tobit, Judith, and 1 and 2 Maccabees. Modern scholars agree that historiography, the writing of history, exists in the Old Testament, but the classification of books as strictly historical was not originally intended. It is important to distinguish between ancient history and modern history, as well as historical records and salvation history. The historicity of Old Testament books varies depending on their literary form. For example, Samuel presents history in a chronicle format, while Tobit is written as a moralistic story. The purpose of these books was not to record precise historical details but to highlight God's intervention in the lives of his people. As 2 Timothy 3:16 states, all scripture is inspired by God and is useful for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. The main concern of these books is the theological meaning behind events rather than exact historical accuracy. Introduction to the historical books of the Old Testament. The first 5 books of the Bible are called the Pentateuch: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The books that follow are known as historical books because they narrate the history of Israel. These books include Joshua, which records Israel's conquest of Canaan under Joshua's leadership. Judges, narrates stories of leaders, judges, who ruled before Israel had a king. Ruth, is a story of faith and loyalty during the time of the judges. 1 and 2 Samuel, narrates the rise and fall of King Saul and the reign of King David. 1 and 2 Kings, narrates the history from David's death to the fall of Israel and Judah. 1 and 2 Chronicles, is a theological retelling of Israel's history, focusing on the temple. Ezra and Nehemiah records the return from Babylonian exile and the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Tobit, Judith, and Esther narrate stories of Jewish faithfulness in difficult times. 1 and 2 Maccabees narrates the Jewish revolt against Greek rule in the 2nd century BC. The historical books cover nearly 1,000 years, from Moses' death to the Maccabean period, emphasizing God's covenant relationship with his people. Major themes in the historical books. First, the conquest and settlement of Canaan. The first major event is Israel's conquest of Canaan, Joshua, Judges. Joshua leads the Israelites to victory, fulfilling God's promise to Abraham, Genesis 12:7. However, the Israelites struggle to remain faithful to God, leading to cycles of sin and redemption in Judges. Joshua 24:15 reminds them, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Second, the rise of the monarchy. The books of 1 and 2 Samuel describe Israel's transition from a tribal system to a monarchy. Saul is chosen as the first king, but his disobedience leads to his downfall. 1 Samuel 15:22-23. David, a man after God's heart, Acts 13:22, succeeds him and establishes Jerusalem as the capital. Third, the division of the kingdom. After Solomon's reign, his policies lead to a divided kingdom, Israel, north, and Judah, south. 1 and 2 Kings and 1 and 2 Chronicles detail this period, showing how kings who obeyed God prospered while those who worshipped idols suffered defeat. Fourth, the exile and return. The northern kingdom, Israel, was destroyed by the Assyrians in 722 BC, while the southern kingdom, Judah, fell to the Babylonians in 586 BC. Prophets like Jeremiah 29:10-11, and Isaiah 40:1-2, warned of exile but also promised restoration. In 539 BC, King Cyrus of Persia allowed the exiles to return, Ezra 1:2-4. Fifth, the Maccabean revolt. The final historical books, 1 and 2 Maccabees, recount the Jewish resistance against Greek oppression. The Maccabees fought to preserve their faith, fulfilling Daniel's prophecy about persecution, Daniel 11:31-35. Key lessons from the historical books. 1. Faithfulness to God brings blessings. The books repeatedly show that obedience leads to prosperity, while disobedience leads to disaster. Deuteronomy 28 outlines the blessings and curses tied to faithfulness. 2. God uses imperfect people for his purpose. Despite their flaws, figures like David, Solomon, and the Maccabees played important roles in God's plan. Romans 8:28 says, "We know that all things work together for good for those who love God." 3. God's mercy is always available. Even in judgment, God offers hope. 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, "If my people, who are called by my name, humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land." Conclusion. The historical books reveal God's sovereignty, justice, and mercy. They teach that He controls history and rewards righteousness while punishing sin. Through these narratives, we learn that God remains faithful to His promises, offering redemption to those who seek Him. As Psalm 33:11 states, "The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the thoughts of His heart to all generations." The historical books remind us that God is actively involved in human history, guiding His people toward salvation. They are not just records of the past but lessons for the present and future. Thanks for watching. Share if useful. Suitable for education, catechism, and Bible study. Subscribe and hit the notification bell.